need to start this podcast by just mentioning a few things. I mentioned it in the previous podcast, but three things. One is there's a website, martinbutler.eu, which has quite a large number of articles on it now, many of which are not covered in podcasts. So if you want more of this stuff, then you can go there. There's a link below, and I shall have a link to the article that this particular podcast is based on. Second thing, there's a new YouTube channel, and most of the new stuff will go on there. I'm putting stuff on corporeal fantasy basically so I can keep telling people to go to the new YouTube channel. Again, there's a link below so you can go there, and if you're interested you can sign up. And finally, there's a Patreon channel if you want to get down and dirty with the detail. And again, there's a link. So this podcast is based on an article that I've just posted on the martinbutler.eu website. It's called Unbearable Freedom. Why is it unbearable? Because actually most of us cannot bear freedom, despite what most of us think about it. It's easy to define freedom. Freedom is simply lack of constraint. You know, somebody with a ball and chain around their leg isn't exactly physically free. And someone who's got a taskmaster stood over them with a whip telling them to break rocks isn't exactly free. And neither is a child who's got what is really an abusive parent telling them that they have to practice their scales for 5 hours a day on the piano or something. You know, such a child isn't exactly free. So freedom is lack of constraint. Physically we're constrained. You can't get away from that. You can't float up into the air if you want to. You can't fly unaided, and neither can you move from here to the Andromeda galaxy in the blink of an eye. You just can't do that. So there are constraints on what you can do physically. But we kind of live with those. That's the nature of our own particular existence. But psychological freedom is a bit more of an important issue because virtually all of us are burdened with, I should do this, I shouldn't do that. If only I would have done that, or I could do this, or I could do that, or I must do this, or I must do that. And our heads are full of that kind of thing. And that's not exactly freedom, because those things are constraints on our behavior. And obligation is a very big part of that, a sense of obligation, that we have to do all these things. And so we find today that people are eager for someone to tell them how to eat their food, 32 chews on every mouthful, which personally I just could not do. I'd rather not eat than have to do that. And how we should be mindful, something increasing numbers of people, the mindfulness is a big thing now in the sort of new age circles. It's the latest big winner for the people who are selling it. And yet mindfulness is a result, not a cause of things, and that's a whole other podcast. But to walk around believing that you have to be mindful, well, what a burden. Not exactly freedom, is it? So most of what we put into our heads is burdensome, but actually we like it. The reason we like it is because it effectively constrains our life. We don't want freedom. We want a constrained life. We want to be mindful. We want to have shoulds and shouldn'ts, because it puts boundaries around what our life can be. The thought of being totally free in your mind is frightening for many people. So people's behavior, while they say they want to be free, and the naive idea about freedom is that, well, if I had $10 million I could be totally free. No, you would not be totally free. You would have all kinds of sycophants hanging around you for money. You would be worrying about the money. You would have people advising you on how to use it all the time. Having a lot of money is not freedom. Most of the people who are wealthy spend all their time worrying about their money. It's not exactly freedom. And you could say, well, I'm just going to drop out of society, but you can't do that either. These are physical things, really. But this is what people think about when they're thinking about freedom. If you drop out of society, you still need money, you still need healthcare, you still need food, and you have to find ways to do that, and it might be more difficult than being, enmeshed within society. So we all like to swaddle ourselves in our favourite belief systems, whatever that might happen to be. Our ideas about what is right and wrong, what is desirable, undesirable, all these things, we carry this baggage around with us all the time. And to live moment to moment without that baggage is extremely rare. This is what many Zen practitioners aim to do, although Zen is, or can be, even more baggage. And we carry this baggage around because to be free would be totally unbearable. So there are some objections that people might have around all of this. One is that to be free in the sense of having no conceptual boundaries would lead to a chaotic life. Well, that's not true, because we already know what to do. We eat, we shit, we sleep, we drink, we have sex, we earn money, we seek shelter, we establish social context. We do all of these things naturally. We don't need anybody to tell us. We don't need any ideological system to encourage us to do those things. This is our basic being at work, our survival program. And if you've seen previous podcasts, you'll know that the survival program is what drives you day in, day out. You don't need to tell it to do anything. It will do it all. It will get a job. It will find a mate. It will seek shelter. It will get food. It will establish social context for support and all that kind of thing. So we do these things naturally. We don't need any theories or belief systems to do those things. And there's a famous little Zen saying. Student went to the Zen master and said, "What should I do?" He said, "Gather wood, carry water." People want something complicated. This is life. Life's actually very simple. We are programmed in a way to live our lives, to survive, to continue to exist, and we don't need any additional programming to tell us how to do that. The other objection may be that just by living simply and by living from moment to moment, that might imply a kind of primitive life. Not so. We like playing with ideas. Or some people like mathematics, science, philosophy, say. I love philosophy. And there are aesthetic pleasures. So things like music, art, literature, and so on. And personally, I don't do these things to basically accumulate a huge amount of baggage. I do it because I enjoy it. It's play for me. I love doing it. Doesn't mean I carry around some philosophical system in my head that tells me exactly what to do in each moment. And here's a very important point. We can learn things from things like mathematics, science, and philosophy, and so on, but they're instrumental. They're instrumental in that they help us with our lives. They're not belief systems in the sense that they're telling us what to do or constraining our freedom. So when J.S. Bach, the composer, was asked, and J.S. Bach produced, in my opinion, the most divine music that has ever graced this planet. When he was asked why he did it, he said, to the glory of God. Well, I don't exactly know what he means by that, but he also said for recreation. And he produced, literally thousands of beautiful works of music because he enjoyed doing it. He didn't do it because he had some horrible belief system hanging around him, like some other composers. So we can enjoy things without them being a burden. And it's a kind of signature of this age that we live in, that people increasingly cannot bear freedom. They need someone to tell them how to brush their teeth. They need gurus for spiritual advice, for lifestyle advice, for health advice. And of course that's a booming industry because people, for whatever reason, want someone to tell them what to do. And society is the same. We now have this proliferating political correctness. For men it's becoming increasingly difficult just to look at a woman. Is that sexual abuse just to look at a woman? I'm not excusing blatant abuse, but really you may or may not know that fewer and fewer men are getting married for various reasons, and fewer men are dating because they're frightened of being accused of some kind of sexual misconduct. So political correctness, politeness, we all have to be polite even if we hate being polite, which typically we do, and the work ethic. But there's a strange thing in all of this. Most of the people who go searching, have some kind of spiritual quest or whatever you want to call it, or some quest to understand life, tend to gravitate towards things that actually restrict their freedom. And I've talked about Gurdjieff many times in previous podcasts. And Gurdjieff was, he was a bit of a bugger really, because his own life, was fairly, he just lived the way he wanted to live. But, his students were supposed to obey, for example, the 5 obligations. Well, to hell with that. Anything that essentially constructs some framework in your mind as to how you should behave is restricting the freedom of your mind, obviously, and your behavior. But there's a twist in all of this, and the twist is that basically we shouldn't start thinking that we need to be free. It's another burden. There's nothing that we need to be free. We're already free. All we need to do is this is hard to explain and to achieve because there's some horrible little trap in it, but all we need to do is to drop the stuff that is basically cluttering our minds, and then we can become more free. But the problem is, can you bear it?